Hello everyone, I'm Nitahone, and it is Friday, so that means it's time for another MTG Top 10. This week we're looking at Phoenixes. I was inspired to do this one because Phoenixes are pretty big in Magic right now, with Rekindling Phoenixes being one of the most played cards in Standard, and Arclight Phoenix seeing play in both Standard and Modern. Phoenixes tend to be pretty powerful, because they generally come with the best evasive ability in the game in flying, and they tend to not stay dead, in keeping with the flavor that Phoenixes are immortal and can always come back to life. There have been 20 Phoenixes printed in Magic's history, and in this video, we're going to look at the 10 that have done the most on Magic's competitive scene. Before we get started, a quick reminder on how I score cards on these lists. Pro Tour and Mythic Championship top 8s, as well as Vintage and Legacy Championship top 8s are worth 2 points, and Grand Prix top 8s are worth 1 point. Now, let's go to number 10. At number 10, I have Flame-Wreathed Phoenix. There are only 9 Phoenixes that have earned points using my scoring system, so to figure out the 10th Phoenix, I had to go to less elite events and see what did the best there. That led me to including Flame-Wreathed Phoenix in this spot on the list. The Phoenix offers 2 unappetizing options for your opponent. You either have to deal with a 4-mana 5/5 flyer or a 4-mana 3/3 flyer with haste that, like most Phoenixes, doesn't stay dead. It didn't get Grand Prix or Pro Tour top 8s, but it saw some pretty good success in aggro decks in both Standard and Theros block constructed, with high finishes in MTGO daily events in both formats, as well as a top 8 at North Carolina's State Championship in 2014. At number 9, we have a Phoenix from way back in Visions, Bogardan Phoenix. This would not do a great job in constructed formats if it were printed today. A triple red 5-mana 3/3 flyer that comes back after dying once is a little bit too inefficient. It would actually be pretty good in limited though. But in 1997, a card with this effect was very powerful. After all, it was a built-in 2-for-1, especially in a world where exile effects were few and far between. That's why at Pro Tour Paris in 1997, a block Pro Tour, Bogardan Phoenix found its way into an aggro deck that finished in the top 8. At number 8, we have a card that will probably be near the top of the list before too long, and that's Arclight Phoenix. It's one of the Phoenixes that is seeing a lot of play right now, and helped inspire me to make this video. As of this video, though, it only has 1 Pro Tour top 8, but spell-heavy, Phoenix-powered decks are already making noise in both Standard and Modern, so I'm pretty sure that in about a year, this will have jumped several spots. This Phoenix is so good because you can pair it with a ton of draw spells, including those that make you discard cards, and a lot of those are super cheap, so getting the Phoenix back from your graveyard is no problem at all. At number 7, I have Akoum Firebird. Flyers with haste often provide very quick clocks, and the Akoum Firebird certainly did. On top of that, it could also come back from your graveyard late once you got the landfall trigger and some extra mana. An ability like that is some nice flood insurance, as you will always have something to do on your turn if the Firebird is in your graveyard. The fact it always has to attack can be a problem, but you could even use it as a blocker if you played your land in the second main phase. It saw some play in Standard in 2017, showing up in some versions of the Ramanaup Red aggro deck, and it put up 2 top 8s at Pro Tour Hour of Devastation that year. At number 6, we have a Phoenix who's a bit different from the rest. For one thing, it doesn't seem to be on fire, but for another, it gets its power not out of being an evasive threat that doesn't stay dead. Instead, it gets most of its power from being a repeatable Pyroclasm effect. Going up against someone who can just keep wiping your board with Shard Phoenix is not a good time. The amount of value it could give you, basically attacking for 2 in the air until it came time to nuke all the small creatures around, was pretty great. While in Standard, it saw play in decks running Recurring Survival. A deck that ran both Recurring Nightmare and Survival of the Fittest, this deck required you to either discard creature cards or sacrifice creatures for various advantages, and obviously a creature who is easily retrieved from the graveyard plays nicely with both of those ideas. It also saw play in Oath of Druids decks, sort of a precursor to more recent toolbox strategies that run Birthing Pod, at least until they got banned, or Court of Calling, and the Phoenix was the kind of thing you could search up when 2 damage to the board was especially effective. So far, we've seen a Phoenix that likes instants and sorceries, and one that likes lands. Now at number 5, we're looking at one who likes artifacts in Kuldotha Phoenix. It has the exact same mana cost as our number 9 card, Bogardan Phoenix, and it kind of shows you how much creatures, including Phoenixes, have gotten more powerful over the years. It has the largest base stats of any Phoenix on this list, and that, paired with haste, is a scary thing. Then, of course, if you can get enough artifacts in play, it's never going to stay dead. At the Mirrodin Besiege block Pro Tour in 2011, it managed 3 top 8s. 2 of them were in aggressive decks that also ran a bunch of artifacts, with the Phoenix showing up as a singleton copy as a nice curve topper that could close out the game. The other deck, though, was a control deck where a full 4 copies were played, and it served as one of the deck's primary win conditions. At number 4, we have a Phoenix who can come back from the graveyard for only 1 red mana, and that's Flamewake Phoenix. This low cost is offset by the fact that it asks you to jump through some hoops to get there, and for a while, those hoops were difficult enough to jump through that it didn't see a whole lot of play, while in Standard, it managed only 2 Grand Prix top 8s. One in a Rakdos Dragon's control deck, which ran plenty of big creatures that could get this back from the graveyard, and another in a pretty traditional red deck wins deck. In Modern, though, it is played in one of the more recent additions to Modern's top tier, and that's Hollow One. This deck specializes in discarding a ton of cards to cast Hollow One for free, or at least for very little mana. It just so happens that Hollow One is exactly a 4/4, so being able to cast Hollow One on turn 1 and discarding your Flamewake Phoenix on the way there means you can be attacking for 6 on turn 2. This deck can get lethal on you in a hurry, and Flamewake Phoenix is a big part of that. Flamewake Phoenix may jump ahead of some of the cards ahead of it in the next couple of years if Hollow One continues to be relevant in Modern. Lots of Phoenixes are good fits for burn decks, but the number 3 card on this list may be the best one for those decks in particular. Chandra's Phoenix not only provides you with evasive damage to close out your opponent, it also comes back to your hand anytime you cast a burn spell on your opponent's face. It was printed in both Magic 2012 and Magic 2014, giving it 2 different periods of standard eligibility. Both times, it saw play in aggressive red decks that ran a considerable amount of burn, primarily variants of red deck wins. The second time, it also saw play in Boros aggro and burn decks. I don't think it's quite good enough to see play in burn decks in Modern, so it probably isn't adding to its score anytime soon, and Flamewake Phoenix is hot on its tail. At number 2, we have a Phoenix who makes particularly interesting use of the morph ability, giving it a pretty cool design. Ashcloud Phoenix not only does something when it's turned face up, like a lot of morph creatures do, and what it does when it turns face up is pretty great for aggressive red decks since it damages your opponent, but it also comes back to the battlefield face down. This has pros and cons, of course, since if you don't have the mana to flip it, you're not going to be super happy, but your dead creature still came back and gave you a 2/2 after it died. The way the Phoenix usually worked out is you would just hard cast it the first time and hope it could do some damage in the air, then it would die, and you would hopefully flip it at some point before it died again, so it could do damage and attack some more in the air, and then keep doing that over and over again. It was particularly well suited to aggressive red decks during its time in Standard and appeared in a wide variety of them like Temur, Naya, and Boros. And at number 1, we have a card tearing its way through Standard right now, and a card that I think is safe to say is the best Phoenix ever, and that's Rekindling Phoenix. Sure, maybe the way it comes back from the graveyard is a bit more fragile than some of the others on this list. It needs a 0/1 to stay in play for a turn, and if your opponent kills that, your Phoenix isn't coming back. But that's your worst case scenario, and that generally means you're getting a 2-for-1, since your opponent has to use a card to kill the Phoenix, and likely has to use a card to kill the Elemental as well. Either way, the fact that the Elemental is somewhat vulnerable is made up for, anyway, by the fact that the Phoenix comes back for no mana at all, to the battlefield, and also, why not, it also has haste. Yeah, if you're playing Standard right now, you've probably lost to and or won with this a lot, and it is going to continue to amass points as time goes on. Well, that does it for this week's MTG Top 10. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it and share it so others can enjoy it too. If you want to make sure you catch future MTG Top 10s, don't forget to subscribe. There are also hundreds of them in the playlist you can see here. Thanks for watching.